He rose from prophecy and dust, a child marked for death, who became the architect of an empire. They said no man could unite a fractured world. But in the mountains of ancient Persia, a child was born who would shake empires. Before we continue, subscribe. It helps us keep history's greatest stories alive. Long before Cyrus would be called the Great, the lands of the Iranian plateau lay divided and restless. Dozens of tribes fought over valleys and pasture lands, each clinging to its own traditions, its own leaders, and its own gods. Above them all loomed the Median Empire, powerful, wealthy, and feared, ruled by King Astyages, a man haunted by dreams of his own downfall. It was a world ripe for change, a world waiting for someone who could see beyond the borders of tribe and blood. According to ancient legend, that someone began with a prophecy. Astyages dreamed that his daughter's child would grow into a king who would overthrow him and take his throne. Terrified, he tried to defy fate. When Mandane, his daughter, gave birth to a son, he ordered the infant killed in secret, hoping to erase destiny before it could take shape. But the general tasked with the deed couldn't bring himself to murder a newborn. Instead, he left the child with a humble shepherd and his wife, who raised the boy as their own. Cyrus grew up unaware of the price placed on his life. Yet even as a child, he carried himself like someone born to command. He was bold, curious, and strangely magnetic. When he joined the other boys in games or competitions, he didn't simply participate, he led. The shepherd knew the day would come when the truth would catch up to them. But for years, Cyrus lived as a child of the mountains, learning endurance, humility, and the harsh rhythms of the land. But destiny waits for no man. One day, when Cyrus disciplined a noble's son during a children's game, his natural authority drew attention. Word reached Astyages. The king summoned the boy and immediately recognized something uncanny, a resemblance, a presence, a spark he could not explain away. Desperate to uncover the truth, he questioned the shepherd until the story unraveled. Yet instead of killing the child, Astyages relented, believing the threat had passed now that Cyrus had grown. He sent him back to Persia, unaware that he was setting his own downfall in motion. Cyrus returned to his homeland, no longer a shepherd's boy, but a noble of the Achaemenid line. His true father, Cambyses I, welcomed him, and Cyrus stepped naturally into leadership among the Persian tribes. What the shepherd had given him, the grounding of a humble life, the strength of survival, the understanding of the common people, became his greatest advantage. The Persians saw him not only as a prince, but as someone who understood them, someone who could lead them somewhere greater. And still he rose. Under Cyrus, the tribes found something they had long lacked: unity. He listened to their grievances, settled their disputes, and earned their loyalty through fairness, not force. While the Median Empire grew decadent, Cyrus grew capable. While Astyages drifted into paranoia, Cyrus forged alliances. The inevitable clash was approaching, the prophecy coming to life step by step, breath by breath. When the moment came, it was not Cyrus who struck first. Astyages, consumed by fear and pride, marched his armies into Persia to crush the threat he believed he saw growing. But his own general, Harpagus, the man forced to attempt Cyrus's murder years before, defected to Cyrus during the decisive battle. The Median army broke. The empire crumbled, and Cyrus, once the hunted child, entered Ecbatana not as a conqueror drenched in vengeance, but as a liberator. He spared Astyages. He spared the city. And in doing so, he won the loyalty of both Persians and Medes, forever binding their destinies. Now ruling two kingdoms, Cyrus turned his attention outward. To the west lay Lydia, a wealthy power ruled by King Croesus, whose riches were the stuff of legend. Croesus believed Persia was young and fragile, an easy victory. He crossed into Persian lands, seeking to strike Cyrus before the new empire could solidify. But Cyrus was no ordinary king. He maneuvered with genius, luring Croesus into battle, breaking his lines, and driving him back to his capital. When Cyrus captured Sardis, he again showed mercy, sparing Croesus and earning the respect of his foes. The world was watching and trembling, yet it was Babylon, the ancient jewel of the Near East, that would define the true reach of Cyrus's greatness. Mighty walls, rivers redirected as moats, engineering wonders unmatched. Babylon seemed untouchable, but its ruler, Nabonidus, had alienated priests, soldiers, and common citizens alike. Cyrus saw not only the city's strength but its fractures, and with brilliant strategy and careful diplomacy, he prepared the most daring campaign of his life. When Cyrus's forces finally approached Babylon, they did not rely solely on siege engines or brute force. They diverted the Euphrates River, lowering the water level enough for soldiers to march through the riverbed under the cover of night. Babylon, the city that believed it could never fall, was taken almost without a fight. But what happened next would make Cyrus's name echo for thousands of years. He freed the enslaved. He restored temples looted by previous kings. He allowed exiled peoples, including the Jews, to return to their homelands. His philosophy of rule was unlike anything the world had ever seen. He did not command loyalty through terror. He earned it through justice. He believed that an empire built on fear would crumble, but an empire built on respect would endure. And endurance was exactly what he intended. By now, Cyrus had become more than a ruler. He was a symbol of unity, mercy, and unstoppable ambition. The Persians began to call him Shahanshah, the King of Kings. His empire stretched from the Aegean Sea to the edge of Central Asia, a vast expanse bound not by chains, but by policy, tolerance, and order. Traders traveled safely. Cultures flourished. Laws were written. The world was changing, and at the center of it all stood a man who had once been sentenced to die as an infant. But even as monuments rose and cities bowed, Cyrus himself did not slow. His eyes remained fixed on the horizon, his mind calculating the next frontier. He had built an empire larger than any before it, yet he believed it was only the beginning. The world had never seen a ruler like him, and Cyrus was far from finished. The birth of the Persian Empire sent a tremor through the ancient world. Kingdoms that once looked upon Persia as a scattered land of rival clans now watched a new power rising, organized, disciplined, and led by a king who understood both conquest and compassion. Under Cyrus, the lands of Media, Persia, Lydia, and Babylon no longer stood as separate nations. They formed a single realm tied together not by fear, but by a vision that stretched beyond borders. This was the dawn of something the world had never seen, an empire built on unity rather than destruction. The heart of Cyrus' genius was not merely in winning wars, but in what happened after them. Where other kings burned cities, Cyrus rebuilt them. Where conquerors enslaved the defeated, he freed them. Where rulers demanded obedience, he offered respect. This philosophy was not weakness, it was strategy. It turned enemies into allies, rebels into citizens, and conquered nations into loyal provinces. It made the Persian Empire not just large, but stable. The world was watching. After the fall of Babylon, the full measure of Cyrus' character became impossible to ignore. He entered the city not as a plunderer, but as a liberator. Temples were restored, exiles were allowed to return home, and sacred treasures were returned to their rightful places. In a time when kings boasted through devastation, Cyrus earned glory through mercy. Even those who opposed him wrote of him with respect bordering on awe. It was this moment that inspired one of the most important documents in human history. The Cyrus Cylinder, engraved in the cool clay of Babylon, was more than a royal decree. It was a vision of how power should work. It spoke of freedom, justice, and the right of all people to live according to their traditions. It condemned oppression, demanded fair governance, and celebrated diversity. Centuries later, It would be called the world's first declaration of human rights. For Cyrus, it was simply the way an empire ought to be ruled. And still he marched. Cyrus' empire was not held together by ideology alone. His military reforms reshaped the very nature of warfare in the ancient world. He integrated the strengths of each conquered nation, Median cavalry, Persian infantry, Lydian spearmen, and more, into a single unified fighting machine. Loyalty came not from ethnicity, but from shared purpose and shared respect. For the first time in history, an empire did not erase the identities of its people. It elevated them. As Persia expanded eastward, Cyrus found himself facing lands far different from the wealthy kingdoms of the West. Central Asia was a world of nomadic tribes, windswept plains, and warriors hardened by endless conflict. These were not cities to conquer, but peoples to negotiate with, or to fight when diplomacy failed. Cyrus met them not as a distant king, but as a commander who rode with his soldiers, ate their food, and camped in the same dust they slept upon. His presence earned loyalty that no tribute ever could. The empire grew. For a time, it felt unstoppable. But every empire meets a horizon, and for Cyrus, it came in the form of the Medes, a fierce confederation of nomadic tribes ruled by Queen Tamaris. They were masters of the steppe, born to the saddle, and unafraid of any power, even Persia. When negotiations faltered, war became inevitable. Cyrus prepared for what would become the final and most brutal campaign of his life. He was older now, seasoned by decades of victory, but still sharp, still determined, still guided by the belief that fate had chosen him for greatness. The first clashes were chaotic and violent. The Medes fought like no army he had ever faced, swift, unpredictable, striking like lightning, then vanishing into the plains. Cyrus adapted, changed tactics, and set traps to counter their mobility. One such trap led to a major victory, but it came at a terrible cost: the death of Tamaris' son. What might have ended the war only fueled a deeper rage. For the first time in many years, Cyrus faced an enemy who fought not for land or gold, but for vengeance. The final battle came under an open sky, with no fortress walls or rivers to shield either side. The fighting was savage and relentless. Cyrus, as always, led from the front. He fought with the same iron resolve he had carried since the day he survived the prophecy meant to destroy him. But age, destiny, and the fury of the steppe had converged upon him. Surrounded and outnumbered, the King of Kings made his last stand on a field far from the cities he had conquered, far from the empire he had built, and far from the legends already forming around his name. Cyrus the Great fell, sword in hand, unbroken, undefeated in spirit. His body was returned to Persia, to the homeland that had shaped him. In the quiet valley of Pasargadae, a simple stone tomb was built for him, a structure of white limestone rising gently from the earth. There was no gold, no lavish decoration, no carvings of his victories, just a silent shelter for a king who needed no monument to prove his greatness. Even in death, Cyrus chose humility. The tomb still stands, weathered by wind and time, yet unwavering. Travelers for centuries have stood before it and felt the weight of a life that changed the course of history. Generals admired him. Philosophers praised him. Nations he conquered remembered him not with hatred, but with respect. He built an empire not through fear, but through vision, one that valued diversity, justice, and dignity long before such ideas had names. Empires rise, empires fall, but the name of Cyrus the Great endures. Enjoyed this video? Please support the channel, like, share, and subscribe so we can bring more forgotten empires back to life.